Hello everyone. Welcome to the next installment of the Chronicler's Tale. Today, we'll be going over the battles of Lexington and Concord, which took place during the American Revolution on the 19th of April, 1775. British forces were composed of 2,700 troops of the 4th, 5th, 10th, 18th, 38th, 43rd, 52nd, and 59th Regiments of Foot, 23rd Royal Welch Fusiliers, and Marines. American forces were composed of roughly 4,500 militia, many of which joined the battle during the British retreat. The battles of Lexington and Concord were the first engagements in the American Revolutionary War. As the steadily rising discontent with the representation and treatment of the colonials by the British Crown continued to escalate, a provincial congress, determined to pursue American independence, was established in Cambridge, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. To that end, militias were created and began drilling for war. Acting on orders from the British government in London and facing the threat of rebellion, British General Thomas Gage hoped to prevent violence by ordering the seizure of weapons and powder being stored in Concord, some 20 miles northwest of Boston. Gage sent a force of 1,800 regulars from the Boston garrison that was commanded by Colonel Francis Smith, Major John Pitcairn, who was to be fatally wounded 2 months later at the Battle of Bunker Hill, and Lord Hugh Percy. Lieutenant Colonel Smith was dispatched with the grenadier and light infantry companies from each of the regiments stationed within the garrison. Their mission was clear: seize the weapons and ammunition held by the Continental Congress in the armory at Concord. Boston had been sealed prior to deployment to prevent word from being passed, but as the troops debarked from Navy rowboats on the bank of the Charles River on the night of the 18th, the sound of bells filled the night. All of the precautions had been for naught. Word had leaked, and the countryside had been alerted. During the British deployment, Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Samuel Prescott escaped from Boston and made their famous runs through the countryside announcing, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" Paul Revere and William Dawes successfully made their way to Lexington, carrying their warning of impending British forces. Prescott was the only of the three to make it to their ultimate destination of Concord. In advance of his main body, Lieutenant Colonel Smith sent a force of light infantry under Major Pitcairn to secure the bridges at Concord. As the King's troops followed their line of march and made their way into Lexington at around 5 a.m., they were greeted by a small company of militia that had drawn up on the village green commanded by Captain John Parker. Though it is not confirmed who fired the very first shots, British soldiers fired the first volley, killing 7 militiamen and mortally wounding another in the process. Parker's men then fled, and the British soldiers moved on towards Concord, arriving around 8 a.m. By the time the British arrived at the North Bridge, a force of almost 400 colonial militiamen from Concord and the surrounding area had gathered on the high ground across the river. The Minutemen formed up and advanced on the British, who responded by retreating back across the bridge and taking up a defensive position. When the British troops opened fire, the Minutemen responded with a volley of their own, killing 3 British soldiers and wounding 9 more. The British troops then fell back into town and, realizing their vulnerability and having succeeded in destroying much colonial equipment, decided to return to Boston. The retreat turned into a rout as thousands of militiamen began attacking the British column from all sides. Shooting from behind trees, rocks, and buildings, the Patriots inflicted nearly 300 casualties and 73 deaths on the Redcoats. The retreating British force met up with Lord Percy's relieving force, and together they withdrew into Boston, ferried back across the Charles River by Royal Navy boats. Along the march, the British inflicted damage of their own, looting and burning many of the colonial homes. By the time the fighting had ended, the British had lost 19 officers and 300 soldiers killed and wounded. American losses did not exceed 90 men. The British force had achieved its aim of destroying much of the buildup of arms and ammunition at Concord, but the harrying of the troops along the route of their return and the way they were bundled back into Boston was considered by both sides to be a reverse for the British. This success encouraged the spirit of revolt across the American colonies and was the immediate cause of New York being seized for the Revolution. A strong force of Americans moved spontaneously to Boston and invested the city, this force being eventually formed into Washington's Continental Army. Thanks for watching this installment of the Chronicler's Tale. Be sure to like and subscribe to be notified of new content. You can also follow the channel on the social media platforms listed in the video notes below. Enjoy and be well, everyone. Talk to you soon.